Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another video. I want to start off by saying thank you so much for all the support you guys have been giving to the channel. We've been steadily going up in subscribers and viewers in my videos, so I am really appreciative of all the support you guys have been giving the channel. For today's video, I want to talk about some tips to help you learn Japanese. And this could also be implemented in not just Japanese, but any language in general. I have taken the liberty of doing some deep thinking of how I have been able to learn Japanese and what kind of methods, I'm not going to name the actual methods, just my own methods of how I've approached to learning Japanese. Of course, I'm not fluent at all whatsoever, but I can hold a conversation as long as I know the vocabulary that is being used in the conversation. So for starters, try not to translate. That's a very big thing. I'm sure with other languages it can be a little bit different, but when you translate Japanese to English and vice versa, it can be a little difficult because there are some phrases and other kinds of onomatopoeias that you can't really translate. When you try to translate, you basically just end up with a headache because you're gonna ask yourself, but I thought this meant this and this meant that. But there's not a way to translate. The most basic one that I can think of is "Otsukaresama deshita." So I'm sure everybody has heard that phrase before. And pretty much "Otsukaresama deshita" is a normal Japanese phrase that you say to your coworkers after work. And in English, we don't really say things to people after work, we just say have a nice day. So there's not really a literal translation for "Otsukaresama deshita." Every time people ask us, what can you translate this into? We just say, have a good day. Thanks for your hard work. But in reality, no one really says that. And that can be implemented in your normal studies. If you just try to translate everything, you're just gonna confuse yourself. That's why I recommend when you study Japanese, think in Japanese. Number two, immerse yourself in Japanese. But what does this mean? I don't mean come to Japan, and I don't mean put posters and post-it notes around your house like a crazy madman. You're just gonna overwhelm yourself. Of course that could work, but people are gonna think you're a little too crazy, so I wouldn't recommend doing that. But what I mean about immerse yourself in Japanese is just watch Japanese TV shows if you can. Listen to Japanese podcasts, radio, anything where you can hear some Japanese on a daily basis. You're learning a language. So you have to treat it as learning a language. You have to immerse yourself in it. That doesn't mean 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Just for some time. Take a couple of hours a day. So number three, don't use only textbooks to study. I know this may come to a surprise to some people, but using just textbooks isn't the most idealistic way to learn Japanese. And the reason I say that is because we don't like textbooks. Of course, there's some people who like studying using textbooks, but a lot of us don't. It gets boring, it gets stale, and we just don't want to do it. And I'm one of those people. I started out learning Japanese by using textbooks. And even now, I'm tired of using textbooks. I don't use textbooks anymore. To be honest, I have a bunch of textbooks here. I could pull out mountains of textbooks that I have purchased over the 3-4 years I've been studying Japanese. Here, like for example, here we got a kanji book, and here is the next level of it. Look how big this thing is, and this is the second level, and here's the last level. Look at this big thing. This isn't a realistic thing. You know, after spending so much money on textbooks and figuring out why I can't learn this, learning by using textbooks is really much up to someone's preference. There are some textbooks that are much better. I used the Genki textbook when I went to community college and took some Japanese courses there, and it really helped. I think that's the only textbook that I recommend. And another problem with learning Japanese from textbooks is that the Japanese you learn from there isn't quite natural. And what do I mean by not quite natural? So what I mean about not natural is that when you use this type of grammar in a conversation, it's not the ideal grammar that you use in a normal conversation. I've used this kind of grammar in conversations with Japanese people, and they look at me like, what's that mean? Or that doesn't sound right. And then I'm hit with a wall, like, but that's what I learned from the textbook. Why is it not the right one? And I think that's comes into play with, you know, a lot of the textbooks out there. A lot of them teach you right Japanese, but they're just textbook Japanese. Japanese you would see in a test or in a book or a novel. But once you get out there in the real world and you use this kind of stuff, it's not what people use on a day-to-day basis. And the same thing can be said for English. You know, there are some phrases and stuff that we also don't use in normal conversation, but kind of just like whatever. But here I have it pointed out a lot, and I want to say that's a bad thing. You know, I do want to learn a natural way to use Japanese, but I always run into that problem where people always tell me this isn't the right Japanese you're supposed to use this grammar. Learning only by textbook isn't something that I recommend. And the next one actually ties into the last one, communicating Japanese. I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about the last tip. It's actually very important. So you're not going to learn a language by just studying it. You have to use it, and in real life situations. And here's the difficult part about this, is that you live overseas. You can't come to Japan, especially right now. There's no way to practice Japanese. I mean, there are ways, there are websites, there are applications where you can go into a chat room or you can message people from other countries and talk to them in their language. I wouldn't say necessarily study, because a lot of people don't really study. They just want to practice speaking, or they want to just communicate with people in that language. So I advise you to do the same. Don't go looking into studying in those applications. Just communicate with people. Use Japanese. You could even make friends. That's also another plus for that. You have to communicate in Japanese. You have to use Japanese. And if you want to know another trick in addition to that, let's say you got that job in Japan and now you're deciding where you're gonna live. And you know, everyone wants to live in Tokyo and Osaka. It's great. The only thing is that there's a lot of English in those places. Your Japanese probably won't improve as quick as somebody who moves into the countryside, because in the countryside there's less English and there's more Japanese, so you're forced to use that Japanese. When you're in Tokyo, you can use English pretty often. A lot of people here speak English and they'll help you. Of course, you always have the chance to use Japanese here, but I feel as the people who moved to the countryside and then came to Tokyo have become more fluent. I've had that experience with some of my friends. I had a friend in my previous job where he was doing ALT work in somewhere in Yamagata. I believe he said 6 months or a year, I don't remember. But once he came to Tokyo, he could speak fluent Japanese. And I've known people who have been living in Tokyo for over 10 years and they can't really speak any Japanese. They say they can't, but they can speak some Japanese, but it's not fluent. Not as fluent as my friend who was from Yamagata. So that goes to show you, if you immerse yourself in Japanese, in an all Japanese environment, and then you're forced to use that Japanese and have to communicate with people in Japanese, that can help you improve it. So I really recommend that you continue communicating in Japanese. Keep going at it, even if you feel dumb, even if you make many mistakes. Trust me, it pays off in the end. So the next point is study katakana and hiragana. So those are very important. If you study katakana and hiragana, that's going to benefit you in the long run, because that's basically the basic alphabet. Just like English, it's your ABCs of Japanese. You're gonna see those a lot more, and trust me, as long as you know that, I think you can get by with a lot of things. Even if you don't know kanji, have the hiragana text on top of them to help you. If you read books, if you read Japanese books or Japanese manga, novels, sometimes some kanji also has the hiragana on top. So even if you don't know what the word means, you can still read it. It's still a win, because even if you don't know the meaning, you can still read it and you can look it up later. This one's actually more of a mental kind of thing, because if you come to Japan and you can't read hiragana and katakana, you're gonna get overwhelmed. But if you come here and you at least know that much, then you won't feel the pressure. So I think for your own sake, take the time to learn that at least. Even if you're not studying kanji and you don't know kanji, you know, as long as you know the katakana and hiragana, you'll be just fine. And for the last point of this video, learn situational Japanese. Okay, so what does this mean? Learn situational Japanese. Pretty much just learn Japanese that you would use in real life situations. So let's say you go to the supermarket or you're ordering something and you don't know what to say. Maybe look up some phrases of what you would say in those situations and practice them with somebody. Find a friend who's willing to practice with you, or if you live in Japan, go do it yourself. Try ordering in Japanese, or try going through the checkout in Japanese. It's a learning process. I cannot emphasize enough of how important this is. How much easier it will be on yourself if you just go ahead and take the time to learn these kinds of situations. Some people don't even bother to learn Japanese the grammatical way. they just learn phrases and then just learn off by using those phrases. It's kind of what we do when we're babies and we're learning the language. We don't sit there and learn ABCs with our parents. Maybe some parents did. I'm sure we can learn languages the exact same way. Of course, it's easier to retain things as we're young. You know, we're getting older and our brains are rotting out. I still believe that if you learn situational phrases, that can still help you a lot. And I don't know if this is gonna help you guys, but it really helps me out a lot. When I learn a new phrase and I go out and use it, I retain it a lot easier than if I sit there with the textbook in front of me and just repeat it back to myself hundreds of times. Even with kanji, the same thing. When I go in the station or I go somewhere and I see a kanji that I studied recently and I see it there, I remember it because, oh, I saw that kanji there. I remember it. It's very easy, basic stuff. And I know it can be kind of stressful, but honestly, that's all it takes. You know, put yourself in situations where you have to use the Japanese, or put yourself in situations where you see it or have to use it, communicate with it. That's pretty much all it takes. So that's gonna be it for this video, guys. I hope you found it very helpful. And just remember, this video could be only used for learning Japanese. It could be used for learning any language. I think these key tools, I'm pretty sure they've been said before, but I just wanted to share my own perspective and my own thoughts about how I think we should go about learning languages. So once again, thank you very much for watching this video, guys. If you liked the video, leave a like and comment. You know, tell me what kind of difficulties you have learning Japanese or any language. Are there any tips that you also want to let me know but I didn't mention in the video? And lastly, don't forget to subscribe. Once again, thank you so much for all your support, and I will see you guys in the next video. See you guys.